Welcome to I Agree with John and I Do Agree with John. And there's probably a lot of you wondering, who in the world is John? It's not First John, it's not John Pastor, no, it's a good friend of mine who I just met the other day, and I'm going to invite him up here, and he's going to share a story about his life. He comes from Palmer, Alaska. We got a few Alaskans in the crowd. Come on. I'm getting a little feedback. Oh, thanks. And he is a senior here at the University of Montana. He's rocking a pretty sweet beard right now. And so, without any further ado, let me introduce to you the John.
Can you hear me? Oh. Wow. This is kind of crazy. Yeah, so my name is John Hundley, and I'm a senior here. Just another one of you guys, basically. And so this is kind of, yeah, I mean, I'm not like a public speaker, so this is kind of intense. There's like lots of people looking at me. But that's okay. So I'm a religious studies major. I'll be graduating in May with a minor also in ancient Greek. And started off as a physics major, but then I decided that I hated math. Or actually, I didn't decide that. I remembered that. And that's not a good way to go for a major if you hate math. Just in case you're wondering. And then I changed to elementary ed, and then I changed again to religious studies. And I like religious studies because I like asking questions like, why is there evil, and what do people say about that? And what about the other religions in the world? What do they say? Because we in the West, I think we're kind of dominated by a specific worldview, and I wanted to kind of step outside and see what other people were saying, what Buddhists say, what Hindus say. And because of that, because I'm a religious studies major, I realized that for those of you here who are not Christians, a lot of times maybe you come into a church setting or a setting like this and you just kind of expect someone to feed you some sort of line of propaganda, and I hope not to do that. So if I start doing that, you're welcome to leave. Because I think that the human need for unity with God and the human need for completeness and for purpose doesn't all of a sudden end when you start going to church on Sunday and calling yourself a Christian. These are daily longings and feelings, and they're things we search for logically. And so I'm just somebody who has come to discover or kind of stepped into knowing that those things, completeness and unity with God and full life, come from a relationship with Jesus Christ. But I haven't always been this way. I was brought up in a really conservative Christian home, politically and religiously. It wasn't my choice to go to church. It was like, you go to church on Sunday, or you don't like have keys, or you don't hang out with your friends on Saturday night, or you don't, you name it. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. It was like you grew up in a home that it's like you were forced to go to church, basically. So by the time I was 12 or 13, I pretty much lost all hope in God. It was just like this thing. I saw a lot of hypocrisy, just a lot of, dry religion. And I also quickly lost my ability to confide in my parents, because if I brought anything up that I was struggling with, it would just become a lecture, or, that's why we as Christians don't do that. And so that, obviously kind of shuts those doors. Well, if that's all I'm going to get, I'm not going to share. And same thing in school. I didn't really have people who knew me, people who I could really confide in. I was athletic, I had friends, but nobody really knew me. You know, I was like, by the time I was 16, I was going to parties, I was drinking on weekends, and I was like trying to be in the crowd, but I didn't have anybody who was like there with me. I had close buddies who did track and cross country with, but nobody to talk to. When I was 17, I started smoking weed and drinking pretty frequently. I had alcohol hidden in my room and smoked pot to escape my house. And when I was 18, I went to Reno, Nevada to go to college, basically pursuing the Van Wilder or American Pie sort of experience. And I did just that very quickly. I got kicked out of the dorms within a month, and then I failed out of school within the first semester. And I, sadly, those credits transferred here. But that's not the end of the story. So I bet a lot of you guys, even if you don't relate directly, were pretty excited to come to college, to be able to make your own decisions. And I think that's a pretty cool thing, to be able to be adults and to be able to say, this is what I am going to do with my life, or this is what I'm going to do with my life. And I think also, along with that, the reason why I'm up here is because, and the reason why these campus ministries exist is because we think, and I think that you ought to be able to decide what you're going to believe. A lot of times we go to our classes and we kind of subtly are fed a certain belief system that we never really fully accept, but we graduate college never really deciding what we're going to believe and what we're going to stand on. We just kind of come out of college thinking that we know those things, but never really having thought about them. So I just kind of want to share what I've thought about and how God has brought me to where I am. So let me tell you a little story to lay some groundwork. Let's call it a myth. So I have a friend who's an artist, and he paints for a living. He paints beautiful, huge landscape mural paintings on walls and stuff, and he'll paint, you know, little animals and birds and trees and the sunlight coming through the trees and stuff. But the one thing that his masterworks are always people. There's this one painting, whenever I walk into his house, I can like smell the forest, and it's this big painting of this woman sort of walking through the trees, sort of looking up, just like you can tell she's just like full. And there's like a beam of light coming down through the trees, and you can just like, you're just like there in that painting. They say that the best paintings reproduce what's already there to the fullest. The best paintings capture emotion most fully, or they capture the beauty that we see around us most fully. And my friend, like I said, his best art is people, and he's just really good at capturing joy, like joy in a woman's face, or like this one painting of this girl walking through the forest, just kind of filled up with life. And for me, God is the original painter. When an artist paints a beautiful landscape, it's beautiful because it's already beautiful out there. Or an image of joy or love, or kind of an embrace of love, like the old Baroque paintings and stuff that you just can kind of feel and enter into. They're beautiful because they reproduce beautiful things. They reproduce love or grace or just beauty. And God, like my friend who creates paintings of landscapes and fish and birds, God's masterpiece is men and women, us. In Genesis, in the kind of the creation poem and the beginning of the Bible, God says that everything that he creates the whole cosmos, and he calls it good. He calls it good step by step. And then when he creates male and female, man and woman, he calls them very good. And there's like this definite distinction between the animals and the landscape and humans. Humans are very good. You and I, God looks at us, when he made us, he looked at us and he said, that is very good. That is beautiful, what I have made. Like I said, I haven't always thought like this. For a long time, I didn't much care. It didn't have much to do with me. For all I knew, this God was one who told me if I was any kind of man, I'd put my hat on straight, pull my pants up, and go to church on Sunday morning. Early service. Right? So, after, like I said, I got kicked out of the dorms. After that, I hitchhiked around the country. I lived a life of just like a wild man. Just like all my dreams of my youth, I fulfilled. I was a ski bum in Jackson Hole for a winter. I worked on a lobster boat, catching lobsters and making a ton of money in Maine. I hitchhiked from Alaska to Maine one summer. I was just doing all this crazy stuff because I wanted to get filled up. I thought like, oh, if only I could like ski bum in Jackson Hole, that might like make me happy. But really what happened in Jackson Hole is I just got high and high and high and started stealing stuff, started selling ecstasy, started doing a ton of drugs. And I just like was looking in all the wrong places for fulfillment, women or drugs. And that's not to say that wasn't fun. Like momentary pleasure is like definitely real. Like it's fun. Partying, there's a reason why kids party on the weekends, because it's fun. But at the end of the weekend, you feel drained, you feel purposeless, and that's how I was feeling all the time. About 5 years ago, I moved to Bozeman with some friends, and I was living on my buddy's couch in his basement, just like high all the time. I mean, by this point, I'd been kind of bumming around for like 3 years, and I was just like a complete stoner, just kind of a rat, just kind of a wreck, stealing a lot. I mean, I got to the point where I would like go open car doors and steal like iPods and steal like your wallet out of your truck. You know, that was this guy. Yeah. And I was just like, I mean, I started getting mean. I started getting, I was just dead inside. And then there was one evening in June. This is 5 years ago now. It will be 5 years ago this June. I remember sitting out on the back porch of my buddy's house, and I hadn't smoked or drank or anything like all day. And the sun, I remember it being like a warm day, again, kind of like this painting, like the sun hitting the grass, everything, like my skin was warm, you know, just like this warm summer day. And I was sober, and I was just kind of like in a daze sitting on the porch. And I remember for the first time ever, I really prayed. I was just like, God, I don't want to be in this place. Like, I am purposeless. My life is going nowhere. And I want out. I can't get out. I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out of that lifestyle. The next day, I woke up, got high, blackout drunk, snored some painkillers, and stole a car. And I woke up in jail the next morning and spent a little over a month in jail. And that was not the answer to the prayer I was hoping for. And again, I know this isn't your story. Like, maybe you stole a car. I don't know, but it might be hard to relate. But I think we can all sense that there's something wrong. There's something wrong with the world. There's something wrong in us. When God made our paintings, when He made this place, He didn't pencil in like evil and selfishness and greed and lust and hate. Like that wasn't part of God's painting. That wasn't part of the original landscape, and that wasn't part of us either. But we decided that we wanted to be in control. And when that happens, things get messed up because we were made to be in God's painting. We weren't meant to be in charge of our own. So when we take charge of our own and present our painting to other people, they take it and they smear it, and we smear it with our own selfishness, our own whatever it is. And that, when that comes, it produces shame. It produces like hiding. We hide from God. In the book of Genesis, when Adam and Eve, when they first sort of deviated from God's plan, they hid and they were afraid. And God God called to them, and they were afraid because they were naked, and so they hid themselves. I think that's a really good image of what happens to us when we do something that we know is just shameful. We just hide. And maybe we don't we don't literally hide, but we just don't want to talk to people about stuff, and we kind of close our hearts off. And that's what happens. That's that painting just kind of being like, just smeared. You probably didn't steal a car, but maybe you got caught up with relationships to fill in your loneliness and gave away your innocence at an early age. And you try to laugh it off, or you try to sort of push it down, and it just is still there. And you try to laugh it off, or go fill yourself up with more of the same, and it just ends up just weighing you down, and it just hurts. You want to be clean. Maybe you had an abusive home life or divorced parents. I mean, divorce is one of these things that it's easy to just be like, oh, divorced parents, but it's like your image of love in this world just gets ripped apart. And we can't handle that. Humans are not meant to handle seeing their perfect image of love ripped in half. Or sexual abuse. I mean, that makes us feel worthless. It makes us feel unfixable, completely unfixable. These different things, it's hard to be in a quiet place alone. Like, I think that's one of the big reasons why iPhones and why all these gadgets and stuff are so popular, because we can't handle our own thoughts. Because if we're alone in a quiet place with nothing, it's just like these creeping sort of thoughts like, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. Or look what you did this time. And it's like, ah. And so we fill ourselves up with all sorts of things. We hide behind things. Or maybe it's things that we do. Those are things that other people have done to us, but maybe, like me, stealing or drugs or just sleeping around with girls, just feeling ashamed, feeling broken. And like our own stories, our own paintings getting messed up, the whole world, the whole cosmos is all messed up. It doesn't take long to figure out, turn on the news, that this place is so gone horribly wrong. Did you guys know that in the last 7 years, every 7 years in the last few decades or so, there have been more slaves traded than there were in the whole 450-year Atlantic slave trade that we hear about in our history classes. Every 7 years, there are more slaves traded. The UN says that there are between 10 and 30 million slaves actively right now, 10 being the minimum, and most of them children. Girls, sex slavery, boys being handed machine guns and forced to go kill people or make bricks. How messed up is that? And we just live in that. And it's wrong. My first of the 34 days in jail, I got a fairly quick answer to prayer. One of the jail guards came through the door of the little cell block and said, "Does anyone want to go to Bible study?" And I was like, "Sign me up." I didn't know what I was getting into. I hadn't been to church in a long time. I didn't much care. If someone would have asked me to come to Bible study 3 or 4 days earlier, I would have just laughed at them, like, who needs Bible study? Like, and it's funny, and I think it's funny, but it's true. It's we use all sorts of things to cover ourselves, and pot was one of my big ones. But when I was in jail, I realized that I couldn't any longer hide my pain and my shame. It's like, well, I'm in jail for stealing a car when I was blackout drunk and high on painkillers, and the bail bondsman just called my mom, so there goes my cover. And it was like, I knew I needed help. I knew I needed help before that, but I was too proud, or I just wasn't in a place where I was willing to accept that. But in that jail, when I started going to that Bible study, I met a God of love. I met this artist who didn't want to shame me into being better, to going to church more, or anything like that. He wanted to take this painting that had been smeared from the outside and from my own stuff and just put the joy back in, and put the love back in, and put the hope back in. He wasn't a God that considered me for heaven based on how many, Christian bumper stickers I had, or how many little crosses I had on my TV set. And not only in my own life, he didn't only want to repaint me, but he wanted to use me. He wanted to say, hey, look at this messed up world. I'm going to give you a purpose now. Turn around and look, and I want to use you to make this world more beautiful. I want to use you as one of my brushes to go in and put joy back, and bring laughter back over here, and bring hope, and bring justice, and bring peace and compassion to this place. The verse that I read that kind of did me in at the end of, or not at the end, but in this Bible study. I went for a few times, and the verse that really did me in was in Hebrews, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And I just want to share this. I don't know, maybe you won't even understand it, but Hebrews 4:14. Therefore, since we have a great high priest, this is Jesus, who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not fail. Let us then approach God's throne of free, intimate favor with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find favor that's free to help us in our time of need. And in that little Bible study in that jail, I knew that I was in a time of need. I knew that I needed a God who loved me and who could sympathize with my weaknesses. And his name is Jesus. That's what I came to find out. Before, I was drunk and high. I failed at school, had a horrible relationship with my parents, never talked to them. When I did, I just, like my dad, I hated talking to my dad. And now, in May, I'm graduating with high honors. I'm married to an incredible woman. I love this life. I have confidence in who I am and who God is making me to be, and in the life he has set out for me. My relationship with my parents, I love hanging out with my dad because we get it. Like he has a pretty bad past too. But without this God, I didn't have anywhere to put my confidence. Really, it's not even my story. Like what I'm telling you, I mean, you've probably figured out by now I'm telling you more than my story. But it's God's story. And when I said, God help, if you're up there, I need you, that night in Bozeman, when I said that, I was asking God, will you bring me into your story? I didn't really even know that at the time, but I was just asking God to help me and to make me his. And I still struggle with stuff. I'm definitely far from perfect. I mean, there are people in this room who I've offended and hurt, but the artist of life, this artist is repainting me, and I'm growing and maturing. And if I stood up here and told you all this stuff without extending that invitation that jail guard gave to me, does anyone want to go to Bible study? I think that I would be holding out. Because there are a lot of people in this room. I mean, I don't know hardly any of you. But I know that there are a lot of people in this room whose paintings are terribly distorted. And either it's from what people have done to you, little things that people have said over your life that when you're in a quiet place alone, you just hear those things repeated in your mind and you just feel terrible about yourself. Your painting is just a mess. But I want to offer you the freedom, again, the freedom to believe in the one who wants to call you his, this artist who wants to repaint you, call you conqueror, call you beautiful, call you justice, call you love. Maybe you won't end up in a jail cell. You probably won't. But if you close off, if you hide more and more, you'll just end up more afraid and more ashamed and more confused about where you're going, and your painting isn't. When we try to recreate ourselves, we just sort of end up with this crabbed sort of like self-help mentality where we're just like smiling and pretending like everything's okay, because we need God to come in and fill us up. We need to be like this woman walking through this painting who's just like full of the joy of a child. And only God can do that. I'm convinced of that because I've seen it happen in people's lives over and over again. So 5 years ago, I was drunk and high and alone without God. And where are you guys? Is your life in the place that you would like it to be? Is the lifestyle you now lead, the way that you're doing things, is it how you hoped it would be? Is college really turning out like you wanted it? Is your painting getting clearer and more beautiful and more full of joy, or is it slowly sort of getting sucked dry and wiped and made dirty? So maybe you didn't know at all what you were getting into when you came here. Maybe you just had a friend that sort of dragged you, or you saw these green shirts and you saw the little cards or something, and you were like, oh, I'll just go see what this is all about. But no matter what's going on, no matter why you came, you're in the right place. Even if you call yourself a Christian now. Because I'm not talking about some far-off deity who just sort of wants your praise and wants you to get on your knees and shout hallelujah. I'm talking about the artist of life who wants to come in and say, hey, you are beautiful. You remember I made you very good. I want to take these places of shame and brokenness and I want to just retouch them and take them away and fill you back up with that joy. The joy that you had, the joy that I had when I was a little kid before I got jaded and tired and started smoking and drinking. He brings places back to life that have been dead for a long time. And he wants to give you a new name. Like I said, justice, conqueror, love, joy, hope, kind. Like my artist friend, God is really good at creating joy and peace. He's really good at taking humans and making us back into something that's incredible. Because we are incredible. Every person in this room. It doesn't matter what you've done, who you've slept with, who you've abused, who you've been abused by. You are beautiful. God calls you his children. The God who created love and incredible sunsets is just like, that is very good. That is my best work. And he's calling you that. If you know that you're dead right now in shame or fear or addiction, maybe it's addiction even to the approval of others. We look to our Facebook likes to make us feel better about ourselves. If that's you and you feel dead and you want life, hear, even if you're raised in the church, hear Jesus speaking this over you. This is from the book of John. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even though they die, and whoever will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? I love that Jesus even asks that in the verse. That's in the verse, that do you believe this part. I love that. He's like, do you believe this? That's Jesus asking you that. Anything that clings to him will be brought back to life. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter who you are or who you call yourself or what names, what nicknames you've been given. If you want this life, if you want this fullness, this joy, this grace and beauty of life, I'm not going to ask anyone to raise their hands or stand up or do any sort of weird thing. But if this is you and you want to accept this, this free gift, if you want to do like I did and say, sign me up. And you don't have to do anything more than that. But I want to pray. And so I just want it to be free and open. And like I said, pray with me, no matter who you are. Lord Jesus, I don't know everything about you. I don't know everything, but I do know what you're offering me. And yes, there are parts of me that are dead. There are parts of me that I feel distant from you. There are parts of me I don't feel connected to anything spiritual. And God, I'm tired of putting my hope in other things. As much as I understand tonight, I want new life. I want to believe that you can transform me. I want to believe that you can change me, transform the relationships around me. You can do something in a world that desperately needs hope. Sign me up, God. Amen. So under your cards, there are some under your seats, there are some green cards with boxes and little things to fill out. Don't leave without filling one out. And if you happen to be here and you just prayed that prayer, I want to talk to you, because I love that. If that's you and you want Jesus, I want to talk to you. So if you see me, come and grab me. I love you guys. I'm going to miss this place.